Yes, I was going to say
In the
second,
early
but I
days
think,
when he was first introduced, he was an independent villain.
yeah, he was just like a petty thief and could do the bank robbery thing and all that kind of stuff. That's yeah.
In the I first saw him in it was the 2000 X-Men animated series where it was a kid but had the same power where he can make copies of himself and then disappear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
That's how
I
that's
bring
why
him in.
You know, stuff like this, how you guys mentioned that he was a petty thief in the very beginning. Like as soon as he said it, I remembered that was a thing. This further pisses me off because when they're able to go grab little things like that. Also, if you look at it in the Danger Room, when there was some missile from the Sentinels about to hit, and Rogue touched Colossus, and they both turned metal, and then that protected them. There's a brief moment in this era of the X-Men in the Outback where Rogue and Colossus never became an actual item, but there was a very, very slight flirtationship there because Rogue could touch him without absorbing his powers because he was stuck in his metal form at the time. So when they do these little bitty Easter eggs, it lets you know they did their homework to get little things right, and they choose not to.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
speaking of Colossus, he didn't even
It
get
was
he
things like
didn't
that.
get a whole lot of screen time
Yeah.
again in this one. He just had that Danger Room scene and then like
No.
bye. Oh no, we also saw him when he's
Yeah.
carrying a TV and Bobby asked, "Hey, have you seen Rogue?" And it's like, "No, sorry, man. I blah blah blah." We've seen him twice.
I don't know why they hate that
Is it-
character, man. He's
The
so
Colossus?
yeah, I can't figure that out.
He got more screen time.
Colossus is also there in the final fight scene with the attempted fastball special.
I didn't even notice that because
we got two fastball specials in the same movie.
Yeah, they got
There
the
was one in the
real
Danger
one
Room.
in the Danger Room, and then the failed one. I think
Yeah,
towards
I
the
just
end.
don't know
I
why.
think a purposely failed one. I think.
No, it's Magneto pulled Wolvie out of the air.
Well, but I feel like they were counting on that. That was a distraction for Beast to come behind him and hit him with
oh
the
yeah,
cure.
with that, that was
Okay, yeah,
that was
that's right,
remember
yeah.
I remember.
But
You're
it's
right.
just such a weird thing to because Colossus was one of my favorites, and you had mentioned him getting stuck permanently. I don't know if you knew that or not, Wayne, but during one of the big events, he actually got stuck in metal permanently,
Yeah.
and was jacked up to where he
Yes.
almost died, and actually
Yeah.
collapsed on Betty, Psylocke. He almost killed her. He fell over on her. The guy weighs like a ton and a half. Literally.
I mean, and like I know this is separate, but we see him in X-Men where he's full metal Russian jacked, like you punch him, your hand's gonna like be shattered.
But
And-
they just
Yeah.
never did anything with him until his fair shake in Deadpool. And by that time, it was a joke. But
Yeah.
I'm with you, Myron. Some of that stuff they're proving that they could do it. If they chose not to, why?
Right.
And I still think it's because they had all these goddamn arcs. And like Bob had said earlier, more and more and more. Throw as much of that damn screen in as you possibly can. Who cares if they can keep up or not? Because the whip editing, the quick dialogue, the back and forth on plot points is just going to keep everybody like, oh wow, this is a popcorn turn your brain off movie. But after the first two films, no, character driven. The powers are secondary at this point.
That's what X-Men has always been. It's always been character driven as opposed to anything
always
else.
has been. Like I said in the beginning of this podcast, they always keep trying to write them as superheroes in this movie, and
Which they basically turn out to be superheroes towards the end.
yeah, and that's not what they are, and that's why it just falls.
They're
flat.
not the Avengers or the Fantastic Four.
It's always been a soap opera in comic book form. And they just happen to have
Yeah,
powers.
that's all it is.
That's what it was in the first two, basically.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Like
saying.
it was like they had a point A. They like again, like I said, there were two main plots in the first one: Wolverine and Rogue.
Yeah.
With Magneto basically trying to get Rogue. Basically, the first two, Wolverine thinks it's all about him. It's not. It's about this other character. Or again, Magneto's in for the filler. This one, it's no longer about Wolverine. We're focused on Rogue.
It was, but
We're focused on true. We're focused with the
as much as I love Wolverine, he never should have been the star.
I mean, he had us. I mean,
I don't know, man. I've had and still have a huge crush on Hugh Jackman.
I mean,
Yeah,
I'm married. I mean, I was married with kids at the time that came out and all that stuff. So how irresponsible is that? I'll freely admit it. That man, I love me Hugh Jackman.
Oh yeah.
I mean, my
Um,
wife has a crush on him too. So I
Yeah,
mean, there's
it's-
that.
Yeah,
but
but I
no,
just you're right though. He really never should have been because he was never really a big deal until he got his own run anyway when Frank Miller did that series.
Yeah.
or even McFarlane later. So yeah.
I mean, yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. Wolverine has like, but this part is like more about losing Jean, and then again, like this podcast is all over the
It
place, like
is.
because we
It's-
can't really find a common ground on what to talk about.
No, because there
Then he-
isn't one.
And
It's
then you got
all
the
over.
scene, and you got Charles's death scene, which honestly, just like Scott's and Angel cutting off his wings, like that scene, just like seeing Jean's power on what she can actually do, how she was lifting Charles from his wheelchair, Eric telling Jean to stop because like even like it hit Charles badly. I mean, it hit Eric badly seeing, yeah, him and Charles may have been at odds, but they were best friends, they were brothers, like seeing someone he's known for a long time just like
Yeah,
That's
he even
hard.
checked. What's his name? Pyro. Because Pyro was like, I would have killed him myself if you let me. He's like, nah, bro,
Yeah.
stop
like,
right
you,
there.
you say that, yeah.
Yeah, this far.
Talk
no
about my boy
further.
like that.
You
Yeah.
see that, you go to bed without dessert.
Yeah.
Pretty much. And speaking of Pyro, we get to see him briefly. Like we see him at the cure station, basically blowing it up, like saying, hey, we don't like what you're doing. It was kind of like, it reminds me of like he was basically being an arsonist, like how you throw Molotov cocktails at
Hey, if he went
signs.
off his leash, he could do whatever he wanted.
He was basically
abandoned.
like, yeah, no, like
kid.
there was that scene trying to, intimidate Bobby, and then just,
Yeah.
next thing you know, because Bobby's trying to find Rogue, but Rogue's not there, and then next thing you know, Pyro's gone. We don't see him for like another two. We see him like for probably 2 or 3 more scenes.
I don't know if this was budget restraint, but I feel like they really undersold Pyro's powers. Like even he verbally explained it in the second one. I can only manipulate the flame. I can't create it. If you look at anything in the comics, if you look at the cartoon, if you even look at the X-Men arcade game, he could make different like solid flame constructs out of the flames. He would make it like a lion or eagle or
or the
something.
giant fist that would come across. And stuff.
Right. And you just see him as a glorified flamethrower in this movie.
He's basically a Wish version of the Human Torch.
Yeah.
Right. He just can't turn himself, into fire. Like that's like they could have done so much with that and they didn't.
And then
So I don't know if that was budget or not, but
I don't
in
know.
this one, it's hard. In this movie, it's hard to tell. And like you said, when we're the way the podcast is going with back and forth on stuff, it's like the movie. You start pulling one thread on this thing, the entire thing just unravels.
Oh yeah, no,
there's
definitely.
it's not our fault, y'all. It's the writers of the
Yeah,
X3's fault that
there's
we're all
no-
over the place.
Like
We
Piece
should-
of-
if you watch,
I think.
damn
I
you,
really
Brian
think-
Singer.
I really think you should
Exactly.
blame, who you should put the blame on this is whoever was in charge of things at Fox. Because it is this kind of thing, this kind of mess is almost always a top office decision. I mean, you pointed out,
Exactly.
Myron, how the writers had really done their homework and found these little details
Yeah,
in the
writers,
comics.
writers do
bring
their
in.
homework for comic book movies.
Yeah,
Yo,
and they knew what they were doing. It most likely, I don't know for a fact, but it most likely was the people at the home office who said, hey, let's throw in this and this and this and this and make sure we get as many characters in here as we can and we can sell more toys and
Cash grab.
cater to more fans. But
It was,
the,
it was a
the
cast
fans,
rambling about it now.
yeah, the fans had, the writers had two good parallel plots going on for the first half hour or so. We had the Dark Phoenix, we had the Cure. Those two could coexist. Okay,
Absolutely.
like two race cars going down the road, and then this big boulder comes down and smashes the road in the form
Like
of the
boom,
Morlocks.
Morlocks.
Yeah,
Boom.
see, right there, the Phoenix and the Cure. There's your
That's
setup
it.
and payoff. You could have gotten rid of the Phoenix with the Cure.
Or you
No,
could have,
that's how
or
they-
you could,
that's how
or
they
you, or you,
see it.
or you could have had the Cure and the Morlocks because they were kind of like
Well, I'm just saying, if you're going to stick with one cohesive plot, and we were all expecting
which
more
worked
of the Phoenix
which worked
thing,
well for the first two. Like they had only
and
two. They only
how
had two. They only had two plots.
yeah, and how two ended up with the Phoenix thing, and how we started off with this one, bring in the cure. That's everything else fails. She killed Scott. She fucked up Wolverine. She killed Professor X. We're just what else is left? You get whoever's left, and figured out this cure will stop or pull the Phoenix out of her if you're going to go the entity route or something like that. Perfect, done. Mwah.
Brian, you made a really good point, like saying you could have taken away Phoenix with the cure, because they didn't go the whole route of the Phoenix being the cosmic entity that it is, because it's just
mutation.
within Jean.
Yeah, there it is.
Could have shot her with the cure and been done.
Yeah.
You're not gonna get the real Phoenix like that.
Hell, looking at
No, you can't. It would
No.
yeah. But that's my point.
That,
Bringing that in in this movie with it being in her and not the separate entity. That's how, because you can still introduce all these other characters, but she's just wrecking house across the board, and like whoever's left is like,
I mean,
what
yeah,
the hell do
she's
we
doing a
do?
lot of killing, and plus seeing how her face turns, like her eyes turn black, her skin is
Yeah.
like, and you see her veins like
Yeah.
that when she activates her powers. It's like it's
And
fucking
if you're gonna
scary.
kill off Charles with her, then lean heavily on Eric. What do we do? You're the last one of us that's this old that knows what
I
can be
mean,
done.
she, and not to mention almost what she does to him. She basically like scares him by, he shows the Morlocks in the forest scene, like, hey, this is basically what another version of the cure is. It's plastic guns with these darts, and then the scene where she basically unopens the thing and like points them at him, which I think is nice foreshadowing in a sense, because like like when you see him get stabbed, like again.
Yeah, it's just unfortunately they started down really good path,
Mhm.
deviated, then kind of went back on it, deviated, and
Deviated.
every deviation got farther and farther away from a cohesive, engaging, and to some extent coherent plot with a payoff. Because at the end, it's just a culmination of bullshit. You're just throwing
Yeah.
everything at the wall
Yeah.
and very
Mhm.
little stuff.
Hoping something that does stick.
And you mentioned the forest scene. My God, how many other ancillary mutants do we need to see on that too? It wasn't Marrow, but it was equivalent, with the bone.
It was
guy.
somebody who could have been Marrow. They could have just.
Oh
they
yeah,
could've
where
just
he was
actually
like,
made him
where he's
Marrow.
like taking the thing out and just like,
But it's
when-
bones. Marrow
or Spike, because
Yeah, I
at
was
this
just gonna
point,
say.
X-Men Evolution is out at this point, so you could
Oh
have done
yeah, the
Marrow or
animated
Spike.
series. Yeah,
Yeah.
Spike. He was a kid. Blonde. He was a kid with the blonde hair who like could have spikes come out of his body. I
Yeah,
remember.
like
I
the
remember
bones,
him.
yeah.
Marrow and a few of the others protruded their own bones and had to snap them off and whatever, made that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
However, you're going to do that stuff, but they started introducing even more and more of these ancillary characters. It's like, why?
And doesn't Marrow die by his own power basically? Because I remember he's chasing Wolverine in that same scene.
Oh, and that's he gets all jacked up. But I'm talking about like these characters from the comics, these ancillary characters, just inherently, and then start bringing in more and more into this movie. Why? There's no payoff to it.
I just thought about it as all those just random mutants in that forest scene that were like in Magneto's army. We talk about hating the fact that you'll just slap a name on a character. If you're doing that anyway, why not throw a bunch of like they could have. There's nobody else in that other than the person who could have been Spike or a male version of Marrow. Other than that person, there's no other power set among those random mutants where I'm like, that could have been this person, that could have been that person.
Yeah.
I mean, golden
They're
opportunity
crap.
to just throw some people in there if you're already doing it anyway.
So
and
that
then
one-
fail with that.
So that one character that Wolverine's fighting was basically, he's cutting off the arms and growing back. He was never in the comics.
If it was, it's a conglomeration of multiple other characters. I'm with Myron on that
yes.
one.
I will say though, because I do like talking about some of the funny scenes. Because I mean, if there's one thing that all the X-Men films have in common, there's always a funny scene, like when Wolverine's fighting, the guy, and next he kicks him right between the legs, telling him, try growing
Grow
those
that
back.
That was ever so slightly not as bad as what happens to a toad when they get struck by lightning.
Nickname,
Like that.
yeah, no, that's already been discussed two
Yeah.
reviews ago. But I mean, I do. I mean, I guess to talk about it, I do like how there's all the X-Men films have like a funny scene, like
Oh, sure, the
when-
middle
when-
finger with the claw and stuff.
or like when
Yeah.
when Wolverine meets Beast, like Beast tells Logan, "I heard you're quite the animal," and Logan says, "Well, look who's talking," and then you see that like that smug like
Did you just call me boy?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, another funny scene next to Colossus and some other kid are watching Iceman and Rogue just kind of flirt, and you see there's this drawing that Colossus made of Rogue kissing him, and his like hair is
yeah,
like
his
Yeah.
friend
that's another.
his
It
friend
was
shows
funny,
him-
but
his
that's
friend shows
another.
the caricature of Rogue kissing
Yeah,
Rogue
yeah.
kissing Bobby, and then Bobby's face like
And that's another, they did their homework thing because Colossus is an artist in the comics. And there's a time where he kind of gave up being a hero. He didn't give up being a hero. He kind of like just kind of got his life's wish. That it was that whole Siege Perilous thing where some other alias he had, I forget. Anyway, he was like a famous artist. He was always, even before that, he was always drawing people. Like there's even a scene in the Outback where he's doing like a somewhat nude drawing of Psylocke. She's like, I'm cool with you doing this as long as I get a copy of it, that kind of thing. So this is another nod to them actually doing their homework and not doing much with it.
see
Yeah.
like no you can tell that they probably had some people who have read the comics, because I mean I feel like having quote unquote experts or people who've read the comics as a kid, like having people like that on the film is a good thing to have, because then you're not like bullshitting it halfway or just coming up with your own thing like how they did with the season finale of Game of Thrones.
Oh,
Yes, we like to crap on other things here. No, it is not serious. We like to joke on this channel. If you don't like that.
Speaking of comments, did y'all already touch on the fact that this would have been past episodes, I think, if y'all did, but the fact that Bryan Singer forbade the cast from reading the comics.
Mhm.
Oh, really? He told him
Yeah.
not to read.
Yeah, he basically
No, we didn't. I don't think
I'm
we did.
paraphrasing a little
We didn't touch up on that, because I think having the cast read the comics will like have the cast like, okay, this is what the characters, this is how I need to be. Not like, don't read the comics, just meh.
yeah, I'm paraphrasing, but I'm not too far off. Bryan Singer's on record saying that they were forbidden from reading the comics because he felt his vision for the movie was more important than the source material. I'm like, how dare you, sir?
Like a slap across the
Other
face.
than trying to make that obvious separation between the comics and the movies, like we were talking about earlier.
Mhm.
But still, you've got to have some grounding in what you're.
Without source material, you don't have this thing to make the movie from anyway.
That's what I was-
don't
I mean,
That's what I'm
that's
getting
that's a good example.
Yeah.
That's a good example for this film. It's like they
I
just
could understand if it was a literal translation, like we were talking about earlier. But an adaptation, you've got to have some idea. I mean, that's how you get 1984 Dune. That's how you get really bad movies adapted from great source material.
Right.
Blade Runner is a good example. In and of itself, Blade Runner is a great movie, but it's not a very good adaptation of the source. So,
and there's always those hit and misses.
Oh, for sure. But in this
And
case,
This one's
don't-
like this one's like a good example of picking random stuff from the comics, picking random character. I mean, I get what they were. I get what they were trying to do. They were just trying to cram so many characters, even if the characters didn't have a name. Like if you were a fan of the comics, like, hey, that's so and so, but they're not. Or like how you said Callisto, she's not like that. She's like in this film, she's like Quicksilver, but in the comics, she's like this badass chick
With one eye.
with one eye and
Yeah.
not a Mike
A face
Tyson
tattoo.
not a Mike
Yeah.
with no Mike Tyson tattoo.
But I'm
basically.
100% with Myron on that, saying, how dare you, sir? Because once again, it just goes to prove probably what has been the case across the board with the direction. It's been character driven. It's always been character driven. They're trying to make a superhero film because of standing on the shoulders of giants from previous films and what is popular. That's just not what this series has ever been about. And the first
No.
two kind of show they had parts of that right because they were writing a movie with these characters in it, but just didn't know how to handle the X-Men. Because
Yeah.
is the first one perfect? No. Is it fun? Absolutely. Is 2 perfect? No. Is it good? Absolutely.
Yes.
Same deal.
Yeah.
But because there was some grounding in characters, whether they got them 100% accurate to the comics is kind of irrelevant at that point. Because
Yeah.
but in this one, they're just I nobody probably really paid much attention to Hank's origin. They would have done that a little bit differently. They would have done Angel differently. Yeah, they were just, oh, that's a character in the book. Throw it on the screen.
Again, Kelsey
Yeah.
Grammer, Kelsey Grammer, I have to give props to him for sitting in that chair for who knows how long, having the
yeah,
fake
no,
fur,
it was great.
Right.
the blue makeup,
Not
the
only
teeth.
that, not only that, but he took some of Beast's least believable habits and made them believable. When he says, "Oh, my stars and garters,"
Yep.
when
Yep.
he's quoting, when he starts to quote Winston Churchill in the middle of combat. I mean, when
Yeah.
he's upside down reading his book, hanging from the ceiling. I mean,
That's right out of the comics.
That's
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, it's right out of the comics,
Yeah.
and those are just all three of those are right out of the comics. Those types of things. They're hard to believe when I read them in the comics, but Kelsey Grammer made them
Because I
believable.
never hear
live action.
anybody say, "Oh, my stars and garters."
I
Oh,
find
He
it.
made
fu-
it. He said it as if it's a common phrase.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
no,
yeah,
and plus
you know
I
it
like
from
how
X-Men.
he was basically trying to make it seem like he was older than Logan. Say, no, I've been fighting for mutants' rights before you grew claws, boy. And then Wolverine's like, did you just call me boy? It's like
Yeah,
do you not realize how
Wolverine is actually older.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
considerably older.
I mean-
I will say Kelsey, when I found out that Kelsey Grammer was going to be playing Beast, I had my doubts. And then I remembered how terrible Michael Keaton was as Batman, right?
Yeah.
And so here we are, and his was arguably the best performance in the movie.
Oh no,
Oh,
no.
Well,
it,
it's
it
also
was.
the best actor besides Sir Ian and Sir Patrick, but
Yeah.
caliber of acting.
I
Once
mean-
again, I've never had any issue with the casting except for Vinnie Jones, and I love, like I said, I love Vinnie Jones in this movie. Performance-wise, they did the best they could. It's just the shit they were given. That's the
And,
problem.
like they mainly
Falls
focused
down.
they mainly focused, as always with these kind of movies, they focused on the main characters. We got to see a lot more with Kitty Pryde. Again, Elliot Page, he did a
Fine.
phenomenal job playing. I
He
mean,
did.
and this funny enough, what I also find funny is this is also the third time they changed Kitty Pryde's actor. The first one she was like older, second one she was younger during the X-Men during the X-Mansion takeover scene where she's running through the
Yeah.
walls.
Yeah.
And then she's aged up again for this one. Like make up
I
your
don't think they really ever intended to do anything.
And Elliot was still, he was still playing Kitty in Days of Future Past. With
yeah. He was brought. Yeah, he
These
was
are
brought.
both good performances.
Yeah, he was brought. I'm glad. Like, okay, so they brought him back to play Kitty Pryde again. It was nice to see them bring back a returning actor to play the same role, and not like, oh hey, by the way, we don't need you more. We're gonna switch you with another actor again.
Yeah, I just don't think they'd ever really had any intention on anything on doing anything with Kitty, because the proof of that also goes with Nightcrawler.
Oh yeah. By
They
the way,
didn't do
Alan Cummings.
anything
By the way, Alan
with
Cummings.
Kurt.
Bye.
Ugh.
We're not going to show you again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was
I
upsetting
think-
because their history is intriguing and great and
Yeah.
wonderful and all that, and they just
Mhm.
didn't do shit with either one of them in the past two films. But once again, they weren't really the focus; they were parts of a larger whole.
They were
had
just a
part of
side
that writing.
character, and
But they had the
Mhm.
writing and the plot made sense. Granted, I would have loved to see more of Nightcrawler in the way that I know him.
I would have
you know,
been. It would have
Yeah.
been cool to see Nightcrawler in the final scene.
Yeah, and that's the problem with this movie. There was so many good setups from the previous two in different
Oh,
directions.
and I'm sure
that
I'm sure this movie went through like script hell.
I've
Probably.
looked up stuff on Wikipedia,
And it's still there.
IMDb, and there's so many conflicting stories on it. But I think a lot of it they didn't want to admit what was going on with Brian at the time too, because he was leaving to go do that creepy semi-pedophile version of Superman with Return. There's parts of that movie that I just get creeped out by, like when he's outside the house and stuff. It was just like, you left the X franchise to do that, but whatever, it's fine. Money talks in that
Dude,
industry.
Isn't
and that's
that
fine.
kind of why Cyclops got killed off early too? Because like, didn't he have a conflict? And they were like,
I think
okay,
he was going to go do Enchanted or something, but
Yeah,
Something like that.
Cyclops. Yeah, I think a year or two later he went on to go work with Disney to.
yeah, but
play
I think he was
Prince.
already committed out. But that tells you a lot right there when your key players are not really wanting to do anything to do with it.
Yeah.
No matter where you go at in this film, take any freaking scene that there's no payoff from anything previous, and what little you do get doesn't mean anything
I mean, and then
because they
there's
throw so much.
Oh, yeah,
Because they
and-
have so much, the dialogue's terrible, everything other than key people.
oh yeah,
even then,
and there's I also in the scene I felt bad for what happened to Mystique. Like she didn't die, but like Charles like basically saying you're no longer one of us, basically, and she's just like,
Magneto said
That was so cold. Even
Yeah.
Pyro looked at him like, dude, really? Did
Yeah.
you?
I mean, well,
That's
I mean, she was no
hardcore.
longer immune. She was basically her herself, which I'm glad Rebecca Romaine came back to play. And then she basically well, like, well, you did this to me. Well, I'm gonna tell the government where your secret hideout is, basically. And
Yeah.
you
Well,
know,
see, the problem with that scene though too is that that wasn't part of a larger arc that there was really any cohesive flow to. It
I
was
feel like
just a
Mystique
one and
was just
done.
brought back because she was such an iconic character. I mean,
Yeah, but I'm just talking about within the confines of this particular movie and the script and the storyline. So what if she got hit? You know, if Magneto was an all for one, one for all type of person and was really loyal to his brothers, why the hell was she excluded just because they did that to her? He
mhm.
should have been grabbing her and like, oh my God, come on, honey, we're getting out of here.
Right.
I will protect you. Nope.
But in
Just-
his eyes, it's like you're human now. You're basically,
but then that makes him no better than the people he's fighting. That's what I'm
exactly,
saying. God damn it.
exactly.
That's what I'm saying.
He was
That
kind of
Just
being
gonna leave
a-
her there cold and naked.
I mean,
for-
he felt bad saying it was a shame, blah blah blah.
But
But he was being
That's it.
he's being a hypocrite, basically.
oh,
Yeah.
horrifically so, and it just goes against the setup for his character arc in this movie. They go so far, then fall so much farther back, and then deviate from that. That's what I'm saying. This movie's plot is
That's-
just
I mean,
all
in
over the
all
fucking place.
honesty, looking at now, this movie's looking at from a different perspective. It is a clusterfuck.
Oh, it's terrible, and it's unfortunate because it really should have been phenomenal.
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sure. I'm
Should
sure.
have,
Actually,
could have.
I'm sure. I mean, I'm sure if Brian Singer has still directed it, and probably it would have been how like the first two films were. Who knows? I just
I
know.
thought that
I just know when you
I-
bring a new. Sorry, Bob. Go ahead.
I was saying, I actually thought that aspect of Magneto's character drew a pretty good line through the movie where he was, if you're not a mutant, I don't want you, period.
Mm.
And he'd gotten just that radicalized by that point.
Fair enough, except for the fact that he was talking about fighting the establishment, so to say, and the people that were trying to eliminate his people. So if she had come to him saying that, hey, I chose not to be a mutant, then I can see him
Mhm.
rejecting her because you're going against my morals. You're going against what
He
we've been
was
fighting
more. He was
for.
just more looking her on the ground, practically naked, basically.
But having seen them do that to her,
I mean,
it
she was.
should have been
She
holding
was
him
like. She
further.
basically was protecting him.
Yeah, I was
She-
about to
she-
say
yeah,
she jumped
basically-
in front of that bullet that
Yeah,
saved
she-
him. That was supposed to be him.
And she fully knew what she was doing. She basically sacrificed her mutant powers, basically
So she should have been the poster child for his movement.
her
Yeah.
mutanity
Identity.
Mutanity, I like that.
Yeah, but he
Right.
should have grabbed her up and held her in front of the rest of his brotherhood. The rest of them more like to say, "Look, this is what they're doing." They have
and she
taken
and
this
she got
away
she
from
got her revenge, basically. She's like, well, you're gonna do this to me, well, I'm gonna go to, like I said, go to the government and like
But
say, here,
that's in the it's stupid given the plot points that we're already up to, and then his whole speech about Charles having given more for this cause than any of the rest
yeah,
of you.
Charles was like the poster boy, basically.
But in the interest of what he was fighting for and what he was trying to accomplish, she should have been after that happened. To just discard her completely just brings
Yeah.
up another plot point that has no real payoff. And who gives a shit at this point? Because now I don't really care about Eric. I always found him sympathetic, but at that point in the movie, it's like, oh, dude, this sucks. No,
I mean,
Yeah.
what are you
I mean,
doing?
he
Yeah.
kind of got a little, kind of a little redemption and Days of Futures Past, sort of. But again,
But
that whole
unfortunately, this movie had to happen for that to be the case.
I know this movie probably just to the especially the comic book fans. I'm sure this left a lot of sour tastes in their mouth.
Look at it from a cinema viewer. Look at it from a moviegoer. If you,
I mean, will I be watching it again? Most likely because it's on Disney Plus. I need to finish the original X-Men trilogy anyway.
Sure.
But I guess now I know Bob is familiar with this, and if you guys watched the previous ones, I want to talk about your favorite scene and then your least favorite scene. Starting with Brian, what is your favorite scene and what is your least favorite scene? Start with Brian.
Favorite scene is oh god, I'm torn because we talked about it both being really good. It was the setup with Jean as a child and the Phoenix thing, and a lot of that is looking back at the time when I first saw it, hoping for what we were teased with. So they're very well established, they're very well done, and they were the perfect opening door for what was yet to come that we unfortunately didn't get a very good version of. So those two I think hold equal place for me because it was a great startup, and then just unfortunately this movie disappointed across the board. Least favorite, it probably the entire sequence with Juggernaut because I've always loved Kane in the comics. So granted, we get that silly meme line and all that, but his whole run through the facility towards the end, just the entire sequence, no one scene out of that was terrible. It was just all bad.
Basically, you know, since the kid is there, he just basically runs head into the wall and just gets knocked out. Basically,
and part of that was because of how they chose to handle Kane to begin with.
Oh, that's his real name,
Kane Marco. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, that's
okay, and that doesn't
depending on which continuity that he's actually related to Charles.
Yeah, they're like
Directly,
they're
Yeah,
like
right.
they're
he's
like
not
they're
mute.
like
He's
they're
not a
like
mutant either.
Yeah.
they're like
Did you know that, Wayne? He's not a mutant.
In the
one-
comic, he's not a mutant.
Yeah,
Mm.
Which is a
he's
change
magic.
that I can get behind for the purpose of this movie.
Yeah,
That's one
sure.
of those things that's
Oh,
necessary.
so basically so they added basically they gave him quote unquote super strength as a mutant power.
Yeah, which is fine
Yeah.
because, like Bob said, you got to do something realistic because, yeah, he's magic. The only thing that stops him is psionics.
Okay,
That's the
well,
only
Why he
thing that can
wears a
stop
helmet.
him. Yeah.
duly noted. Just his
Yeah.
also his outfit. Just looking at it now, it just looks so fucking weird.
Yeah, I guess
It looks like, and I'm not dissing on it, but it looks like
no,
it
go
looks
ahead,
like
sucks.
it looks like it was made out of EVA foam.
Oh, it probably was. Oh, his the entire.
I'm not dissing on EVA foam because I know that's the cosplayer's best friend, but like the outfit is like
Oh, it was terrible. It was just
Yeah.
terrible. But so yeah, we're most favorite for those two. Least favorites from when he gets introduced to when he's off screen. Cannot stand any sequence he's in there with, and it sucks because, like I said, I love Vinnie Jones. I love the character. That's probably the biggest travesty. I can forgive a whole lot of other stuff in this film, but it was too jokey, too little for too big of a character just across the board, and it really didn't amount to anything in the end anyway with him doing all that. Because Kitty could have just grabbed Bleach or well, actually she couldn't because of the power thing, but still just sat in the room. No.
I completely understand.
Can't handle that.
I get it. My favorite before I go to Bob, my favorite scene, honestly, because I know we didn't talk about it, is the scene where Eric basically uses his mutant power to move the Golden Gate Bridge to the facility. Like his line, how he says Charles always wanted to build bridges. Like
Yeah.
I know some people, but that scene itself, like seeing him, because I know Magneto is really powerful, and the fact that he can move things from like a giant satellite dish to like literally a good chunk of the Golden Gate Bridge is impressive. Like I can't imagine. Like I'm not sure. Like I'm sure in the comics he's lifted bigger things.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Like what's from your guys's from who read it? What's like the biggest thing he's ever like moved in the
Asteroid
comics?
M.
Huh?
Yeah. And did he like sustain his orbit on his own power?
Yeah, and every nuke in on the planet facing inward as a protection. Yeah. So at all times, keep this in mind, Wayne. At all times, he's holding a giant meteorite that he has his home base on in orbit of the planet, and every nuclear weapon in existence pointed in, and he has to hold them there.
That's
Like
crazy.
I dare y'all to shoot me down because y'all
Yeah,
can mess up
because
thinking
it
what
just
he's
not
doing.
Yep.
That's crazy. I mean, the fact
Yeah.
he even lifted a submarine. I mean, again, that scene was probably my favorite. My least favorite scene, I wouldn't say to at least. I guess not really a scene in particular, but after talking to you guys, thinking about it now, how they added in so many characters and just didn't really do anything with them. They were basically NPC background characters. They were just
Oh, at
basically
best.
who were just standing there, basically like, oh hey, that looks like. Again, I'm not familiar with the comics, so I think the one scene that kind of made me laugh, but it was like when the guy got one of the guys in the okay, is it Morlock, right?
Yeah. More
More like-
yes.
When
Yeah.
he's like the big like fat guy, and then he like gets so skinny to sit down. Like they got to laugh at me, but just adding all those randos that we're probably not going to see ever again. In my opinion, this movie pulled a Mortal Kombat Annihilation. They're just adding characters. We'll see. They're adding background characters we recognize, but in the end, they're just there to stand there and really not say anything. So it's like
Or do anything.
they I feel like they wasted their money. And I mean, props to the actors who, the background characters they brought on to be a character, someone will recognize from the comics. But other than that, just the bunch of unnecessary random characters were really needed. And I feel like that's what a good chunk of the budget went to, was to bring in all these characters that you guys or those who are watching this who are a fan of the comics like recognize. So yeah, it's like, it's not really a scene in particular. It's just, that was just my least favorite thing, was just the random characters. Now that we're talking about it.
Well, because it encompasses almost every scene in the film. That's the problem.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
if I'm going with my least favorite, I'm going with the Morlock Town Hall, which is kind of where everything started to take a downward turn.
Was that like a church or something? Or was that
It was
just
like
I think it was, it was something in the Morlock community. I don't know whether they were down in a church or underground or something, but yeah, that is where everything just started to take the downward spiral with way too many characters.
hey, guess what, boys and
and-
girls? Another plot point that's not needed.
Yeah, well, this is, like I said earlier at the beginning, so far in that movie, we'd had the Dark Phoenix saga plot line, we'd had the Cure plot line. Those two were getting along fairly well. And then then we introduced the Morlocks, and they have nothing really to do with either one. They're just kind of there and muddying everything, and it just kind of turns, that's where everything starts turning into
I
a big
mean,
mess.
Magneto
so
said
that-
it. Magneto said it best. In chess, the pawns go first, and that's all they were to him. They were just pawns. Like he only gathered them just to use them, because he knew that he knew that they were basically gonna.
Yeah, which is fair enough if you'd followed that Cure art and left the Phoenix thing out. That's the problem. There were so many of them trying to converge into one line that they
Yeah.
just canceled each
That-
other
that-
out.
That was a decent convergence of the Morlocks to the Cure plot line, and that,
Sure.
that kind of scans, and that makes them confused. Just bringing things in at that level is just it's just a headache.
Yeah.
Now, if you want to go now at the other end, my favorite is at the point where Kitty psychs Juggernaut.
Come get it, dickhead.
right.
And that's another good reason for Juggernaut to be made a mutant for the movie, is that it gives us that little moment in there.
And like that scene again, it's one of the. I know that scene's supposed to be serious, but it's also, hey, we need it's an X-Men movie. We've had comedic stuff before. We got to add like Kitty calling him a dickhead, like, because she knew, like, I have this kid, I can't go anywhere. He's a mutant. I'm a mutant. This kid basically nullifies our powers. Let's just basically play be a bullfighter, basically.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Just play off of his power and his sudden loss of it, is just as he gets close ahead and he bams his head against the wall and
And
knocks
just
himself out.
yeah, I'm not. So he survived, and he didn't die.
No.
Yeah,
he's
gonna knock out.
Okay, then Myron, what's your favorite and least favorite moments from this movie?
So favorite is actually one that didn't make it to the final movie. If you look at the deleted scenes, that fight that Wolverine and Storm versus Juggernaut and Callisto in Jean's house, that scene is a lot longer and a lot less one-sided if you look at the deleted scenes. So the fight scene was great. it doesn't look like Callisto beat Storm's ass. Like it's actually a good back and forth fight. Whereas if you watch whatever made it to the actual movie, it looks like Storm just got her head handed to her. So yeah, that fight scene that was deleted was my favorite.
I think
My
I remember
least
seeing that in the
favorite-
special features.
Yeah, I was gonna say, was that the one where Storm clotheslined her up the top of the
Yeah.
stairs and stuff? Okay, yeah. Oh,
Well,
yeah,
well-
that changed the tone of that fight quite a bit. Okay,
Yeah,
I wasn't
yeah.
sure that's what you're talking about. Yeah, because she was able to like, pow, and got yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think there's
Right.
a scene where Wolverine puts his claws to the top of Juggernaut's head, and he lets Storm electrocute him, so that the electricity goes through his adamantium and
Yep.
Electrocutes
It's
Juggernaut.
all cut.
I
Because
remember that.
otherwise it's
I remember that deleted scene. I remember this having the special edition of the third film, disc 2, and I remember that scene
Okay.
very well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
Save
otherwise there's
save
no
save time, money.
Bring in
yeah.
more characters and useless plot points.
right. Because
Pretty
otherwise
much.
there's no explanation as to why, like, they were getting thrashed, and then all of a sudden we look around and we only see Storm and Wolverine there, and we don't see Juggernaut and Callisto. Like, wait, weren't they winning that fight? Where are they?
Mhm.
So there's no explanation as to why that happened. My least
And-
favorite is, going back to Juggernaut and Kitty. Right before this movie came out, a few years before, there was this series called X-Men: The End that Chris Claremont wrote. And of course, it's not canon because X-Men still went on. But I think there were several ones like that. There was Wolverine: The End, X-Men: The End, Spider-Man: The End, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
In this series, and again, I don't know how much stock you want to put into it because it's not canon. They get attacked by the War Scrolls. They're like it's kind of like a Wayne, for since you don't know this from the comics. The scrolls that were in, I think, Captain Marvel.
Yeah, I'm
Similar to
familiar.
them.
I'm
Yeah.
familiar with the Skrulls because of Captain Marvel.
Okay.
How they're basically good in Captain Marvel, but like throughout the rest of the universe, they're technically evil.
Right. So these are like, to keep it short, scrolls on steroids. Like, they're like, you don't want to F with them, basically. So they get attacked by War Scrolls. Kitty does the same thing that she did to Juggernaut in this movie, and the scroll dies because once she lets him go, he materializes his body into the ground and he's done. And like, there's a quote she says afterwards, "Hey, it was either my life or his. I had to act quickly, and I don't regret it."
So they took that from
Juggernaut-
they took that out of the comic and where she basically pulls him underneath the floor.
I don't know if they pulled that from that comic, but Juggernaut should have been dead because he's not the avatar for Sidorak, which is how he got his powers. That's the only thing that makes make sense. But because he's a mutant now, as opposed to the avatar for Sidorak, he should have been dead.
Yeah.
Right. He shouldn't have just made space in the ground where he was.
And basically
That
does that like
ground
he
would
does
have-
like that thing and says,
Because the nature of her powers is she literally deatomizes and stuff and phases through solid matter.
Right.
She
Yeah.
doesn't like displace it. There's a big difference.
Yeah.
He's not
He wasn't
phasing.
displacing the ground.
he
he should
actually-
have been integrated into the
Yeah, like
ground and either been
telefragging.
dead or screaming in pain.
Yeah.
one scene I liked adding because I forgot to mention, we actually get to see Bobby as like Iceman when he's fighting Pyro.
Finally, right?
Like since he's Yai, but like Pyro saying, you should have stayed at school with Bobby, and then Bobby says, still, you should have you. But like the fact we got to see,
Should never left.
yeah,
Yeah.
the fact that we see like Bobby like fully turn to Iceman was cool. Was it brief? Yes, but at least they brought something from the comics. Because I know Iceman, first time I was introduced to Iceman was in the Spider-Man and Friends animated series from
Yeah.
like the late 70s, where we got to see Iceman and the girl with the flame power, whose name I can't remember.
Firestar.
Firestar.
Thank you. That's how I was introduced to Iceman. Well, and of course the X-Men Evolution, but like seeing that, I thought that scene was cool where he basically killed Pyro. Say it, deny it or not, I think he froze Pyro, in which I think would have killed Pyro.
Well, he headbutted him, and I'm pretty sure Pyro probably got Phoenix snapped when she snapped everybody else.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't like that scene itself was impactful, and not to mention, seeing
Yeah.
Wolverine slowly, yeah, he has a healing factor, but like, him walking up, his clothes are basically being stripped, and the only thing we're seeing is his skin just like sort of like, but since he can regenerate,
Yeah, and my lovely Hughes performance during that was just fantastic too. She actually bought that it was hurting him, not just physically but emotionally, to have to do that because
And not to
had
mention he also had to, you know, kill her too. So
Yeah,
that's like the
I-
and the third and the
See, there we go back to stick with that fucking arc from the beginning.
And let it be
That
known-
payoff would have been great. But by that
I'm not
point,
trying to piss
who
anyone off here,
cares?
but if you think about it, throughout the entire X-Men film, like all three, he stabbed 3 women. Stabbed Rogue by
yeah.
stabbed Rogue by accident. Thought he killed
Hit Mystique.
Mystique,
Mystique, yeah.
and then
Yeah. And
he-
intentionally killed Jean. Yeah.
he didn't want to kill Jean, but you know, she was
Woman
literally-
stabber.
like she was like towards the end, like you can even tell like she was like, please kill me, because she's letting the Dark Phoenix take over.
But see, that just goes right back to the very beginning of what we started talking about, even pre-recording and all that, is that the arc that we started off with from the tease from 2 should have been what this whole movie was about. And like Bob had said, you could bring in the cure. And like I was saying, then there's your payoff for it. I mean, all this could have been just one tight, cohesive freaking plot without all this ancillary stuff, because it would have been more character driven, like the comics, like the source. And the fact that they just threw everything out at once. By the end of that movie, other than Hugh's performance, believe it, and once again, I'm biased, but other than his performance when he went to go kill her, really, who cares? I was already done with the movie a half hour prior. This Last Stand bullshit didn't count. The Golden Gate Bridge thing going across here, yeah, it was a spectacle. But even Magneto's arc, who cares? It was just falling apart second by second, and it's so unfortunate because these are all characters that I've loved for years and years. When Jim Lee took over the X-Men back in the 90s, it was a revitalization of my love for the characters because somebody got it and they looked better, But I don't know how the two of you felt about it, but by the time we got to that scene, it was really just, is it over yet? And I never felt like that with the other 2 films. I really didn't. I did not care. And even Hank jumping around and stuff, it was like, that was cool.
Too little, too late.
Yep. And not enough of what made it strong. And it's just unfortunate because nothing really felt tied up. Nothing else felt really accomplished. And even though Jean was killed, it's just like, I don't care.
No, I get it. And then towards the end, we're shown a sad, quote unquote, non-mutant Magneto somehow, which I don't understand, because it shows the movie that the cure permanently keeps you like that. Somehow Magneto was able to, move that metallic chess piece.
He's implying that your X factor is still stronger than something artificial because you're naturally that way.
Yeah.
That sounds,
And then towards the end is when Charles Xavier somehow has his subconscious going to someone else, and
which they brought up earlier with when he was talking to Moira and the kids, and all the setup and the whole ethical question, which is another plot point. Great, let's follow that, and we can incorporate the Phoenix stuff. There's a lot of these little side tangents that could have been incorporated to a much more cohesive story.
I know wholeheartedly. And like I said, I'm sure that there was a good script. Like
there has
sure,
to be some.
I'm sure. I mean, because with every movie, there's those movies that like they're not great, but then you go into Wikipedia and you see what the original plot was. Like, why didn't they do that? Why was that not a thing? And then you find out, well, the actor couldn't do it, and they wanted the actor, or there's time constraint, or even the studio was like, no, this needs to be done. This is when it needs to be done. We don't care about the fans. We just want the money.
And that happens with all of them, but it's just so upsetting because, like I said, this was one of the most anticipated climaxes for me in a series back in the day. That was the most disappointing until Spider-Man 3.
Right?
And we'll be.
Am I wrong?
I mean, you're not wrong, and we'll be covering this.
Topher Grace should have never been Venom. Topher Grace was the wrong person for Venom.
But we're gonna cover the Spider-Man series very soon.
All I'm getting at though is that this one for me really stung because it was highly anticipated, given the strength of the first 2 films, my love for the characters, my love for the comics, the genre was actually starting to gain ground. I wasn't being ridiculed every day for being a nerd and all that stuff. Or I didn't have to hide it, kind of thing. You know, we were able to let our geek flags fly. This stuff was starting to get popular, and then just an utter disappointment. And then, like I said, until with
Yeah, no.
Spider-Man 3, it was upsetting.
Oh,
But you know what? They did it to us again with Blade Trinity. So
Ooh.
for some reason, these fucking studios can't get a third film.
pre MCU. I mean,
But even then,
Yeah.
I'll still argue that Iron Man 3 has its weak points.
I mean,
It does. Yeah.
Because
no,
Mandarin. You know,
yeah.
so-
Slattery.
Again, we'll also eventually cover MCU phase movies
Sure.
later down the road.
It's just this movie should have been the crowning achievement of the culmination of a lot of different
We
things.
wouldn't get that until X-Men: Days of Futures Past.
and even then, barely.
In my opinion,
Yeah.
and I've said this multiple times, in my opinion, the true ending to X-Men was Logan. That came out in 2016 or 2017.
Or something like that.
That was
2017, yeah.
In my opinion, Logan was the true ending for X-Men. Everyone was put to rest. Everything was like, okay, yeah. Again, anyway,
You need to read the Old
It's
Man
the ones-
Logan series, though. If you really like the movie, you need to read that
I
series.
will. So
Oh, it's heartbreaking for multiple reasons beyond what you saw in the movie. They just took the idea of that character and integrated it. His own story arc in the comics is completely different.
I believe it.
Yeah, it's
um,
very good.
So, with Bob being familiar with how this, oh yes, Bob.
I had two small points I wanted to bring up. I mentioned before we started that I had some.
Oh yeah,
actors
go
to
ahead.
mention.
I know that's one.
We
thing
already
that-
covered. We already talked about Kelsey Grammer, but the actress who played Dr. Kavita Rao is the Indian woman who was on the Cure project
Mhm.
for Mr. Worthington. Her name is Shore Agdashlu. I think I may have mispronounced that, but I don't know. But she was recently on The Expanse, playing Christian Avasarala.
She was also
Um,
she was also in Mass Effect 2 as one of the as
Mhm.
one of the one of the Quarian commanders.
Yeah, and she also was on The Punisher. And she's been a number of other, I'm also seeing her here in Mass Effect 3, so. And on one episode of the series 24, but she has a lot of things to her credit.
Definitely got to give credit to those actors who are familiar with these kind of roles.
Well,
The other thing is about Sir Patrick Stewart. Now he just this year, 2022, wrested the record back for playing the same character over the longest period of time in a Marvel movie.
Oh, that's right,
Um,
because he played Return of the
that's
Character in
right.
Multiverse of Madness.
Yep.
Yes,
But that one was more based off the X-Men the animated series, Charles, because of
it
his
was, but
big-ass
still
wheelchair.
technically it's Patrick.
It's-
It's
it's
Patrick
his
Stewart
likeness,
playing
yeah.
Professor X. But he also, I believe, holds the record for most cinematic deaths as the same character.
Wow.
He's died 4 times as Professor X.
4 times? I thought he died twice.
He died once in this movie that we've just been discussing.
Hmm.
He died in Days of Future Past. He died in Logan,
Oh, yeah. And then
and
Is
then he died in
Multiverse.
Multiverse.
Wow.
Yeah.
That neck snap. Yep.
4
Yeah.
times, 4 death scenes
I mean,
in the same character
I
in different
mean,
movies.
he's one of few comic book actors who've actually returned, aside from Logan. I mean, aside from Hugh Jackman, Robert Downey Jr., Chris Hemsworth. Yeah, no. So to end this finally, starting with Brian. For those who are familiar with this, and Bob, you're familiar with this too. I'll start with Brian. Was this movie worth making?
no, not in the capacity we got. It would have been worth it.
That's a first no for this
It-
segment.
It fell down far too hard where it should have been standing tall, in my opinion. If they had followed the lead that the end of X2 had done, I'd have been said absolutely. You could forget all the other shit if they just had gone in the one direction. And I feel one possibly two plots would have saved this film. As it is, no, it really wasn't, because there's a reason why there wasn't another movie for how long?
Oh, I think
Long
X.
time.
I think yeah. The next one was X-Men.
First class.
First class.
First-
I think
yeah,
at
first,
least,
first-
at least 4 years later, maybe 5.
Four, yeah, and
Okay.
then you got X. Then you got Wolf.
We don't talk about those too much all that often.
We don't talk about
Again,
Wolverine.
I'm going to say this right now for those who are watching. No, we are not going to cover the spin-off X-Men movies. One, it's not worth it. Two, the timeline's so goddamn fucking confusing.
Yeah, it is. But yeah, and I do say no with a heavy heart because of the anticipation and what should have been and all that. It just unfortunately did not do what it should have done. No.
And there's nothing wrong with that. And for those who are watching, this is our opinion. Just
Yeah.
don't, don't take it too seriously.
Go watch it. Make your own opinion.
As I always say,
Yeah.
do not listen to other reviews like these big time reviewers. Like, don't listen to them. They're, yeah, everyone's entitled to their own opinion.
Fair enough.
Watch it for yourself, form your own opinion. If you like it, great. If you don't like it, that's fine. Just don't be the kind of person who likes it. Like, well, don't watch it if you don't like it, or be the kind of other person like, well, you're a duty dum-dum butt for liking it.
No, I would never tell anybody that. I was like, yeah, go form your own opinion. But I would say watch all three of them consecutively, or at least close together. And you'll see.
Take number 3 with a grain of salt. If you like it, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
My opinion, after
Keep
doing
down
this,
all handy.
after doing this review, for me, I'd say it was sort of worth making. Like, again, I have to agree with Brian. If they would have kept 2 plot points, whether it be the Cure or the Morlocks, or Rogue and the Morlocks, or I mean not Rogue, but Jean Grey in the Morlocks, or Jean Grey in the Cure, that would have been fine. Keep take out the Morlocks, keep the Brotherhood. In my opinion, that would have been fine. But the fact that you're adding 5-6 different plot points from Angel to Rogue to Logan to Jean to Magneto to the Cure to this boy to the Morlocks, you're going. There's a lot
To
of
the window, to the wall.
pretty much. So
And tried to time together, and they couldn't. Yeah.
so it's not a yes, it's not a no. It was sort of worth making. So and there's nothing wrong with having a neutral opinion on this.
That's why I said no as what we
And there's nothing wrong with that. Bob, same question to you. Was this movie worth making?
I am with you. I am going to say SORTA, sorta. So this was, it had its good points, had its highlights. The plot started getting muddied with when the Morlocks came in. That could have been even saved as just focus on Callisto and a couple of lieutenants, and give it give those characters a little meat, and then let everybody else kind of be the pawns that Magneto wanted for dealing with the Cure plot. Tie the two major plots together, the Cure and Dark Phoenix, in some way, other than just ending at the same physical location. There are a lot of problems with it, and that there are a lot of bright points to it as well.
I mean, Marvel has a history of when it comes to their third films, it's a hit or miss.
Mhm.
I just feel like when it comes to a third film, I feel like they've just ran out of ideas, and they are just gonna throw every source material at it just to try to say, hey, you're basically putting glitter on shit at this point.
Yeah,
unless
but
it's,
if you want a good third movie, go with Spider-Man: No Way Home.
I think unless it's intended to be part of a larger story and they are chopping it up from day one, when you start something hoping, and I Eric with that, hoping that it'll continue, by the time you get to that point, because everybody's putting the pressure on you, get this out, there's money, there's this or that, we're gonna lose the rights. Yeah, by the time a third film comes out, they just fall apart, and then creative differences here and there. But yeah, you're right with Far From Home, because that was established and probably written in stone before.
Oh, I'm sure that
second
movie
going.
was in production. Again, another time.
Yeah.
Myron, same question. Was X-Men 3 Last Stand, was it worth making?
I'm only gonna say yes, because had we only gotten X2 and never got anything else, I'd have been pissed off at the fact that we got a tease for Dark Phoenix and never went anywhere.
And there are movies that have done that where they just where they show like a cliffhanger,
Yeah.
but then like a movie a third one's never made because it's not worth it, or there are multiple scripts. And
Like, don't tease us, don't put it there and then not do it. I feel the same way as I don't know if you guys have seen Wolverine and the X-Men, the cartoon series. They set up
the anime
second season.
the anime series that's on Disney
Not,
Plus.
I don't know if it's an anime series. I mean, animated series, yes.
Yeah, I know it's on
Um,
Disney. It's on Disney Plus. I know exactly what you're talking about. I remember when that was shown
Yeah.
on G4. Yeah, they never continued the season
Right.
after that because it didn't get enough views. That's why we never got
Yeah.
season 2.
They set up Age of Apocalypse so beautifully, and then we just didn't get it. I'm like, oh,
Don't tease us.
Right, don't do it. But yeah, only because I would have been mad had we seen this build up for the Dark Phoenix at the end of X2 and then not get anything.
I mean,
So yeah,
I-
if not for that, I give it a meh. Meh.
And man, so I think we're all in agreement here with Brian's no, my sort of, Bob's sort of, and your man. It was, this is a first because every other wasn't worth making stuff I did for video games and TV shows. So I'm gonna have to say this was sort of worth making.
That's about right.
Yeah, the
It-
only reason
it-
I said no is just because of what we ended up getting.
Oh yeah, no, and
Otherwise,
that's-
I'd have been the
that's-
same
and
way. It's
that's
like sort of.
since
but
it's
it's
all
all
since it's all
disappointing.
mixed answers, I'm
Yeah.
giving it a sort of.
Fair enough.
Again,
That works.
watch it for yourself. We do these reviews on these video games and TV shows and movies. This is our opinion, and again, that's why I have these other people come in who have played the games, read the source materials, the quote, as I call it, quote unquote, nerd experts, because everyone who's been on this series is more familiar with this stuff I am. I just want to do it just to talk about my favorite stuff as a kid.
Sure.
So yeah.
But that's where this is so heartbreaking, Wayne. It's just what you just said there. This was our favorite stuff as we were kids, and seeing this as an adult finally on the big screen, and this
And
is
then,
what I
Oh
get.
yeah.
We were waiting so long, and then we got to do this stuff to make it good for the newcomers.
yeah,
I'm like, the
yeah.
newcomers don't know no better. Why leave us
Yes.
behind?
Yeah.
The ones who've been wanting it. We're
I'm the one
reason
that
you
can
have
afford
it.
the toys. I'm the one that can afford multiple tickets. I'm the one that can, all that.
Yeah.
They just really,
Yeah.
and especially after the strength, and we didn't even touch on it, although Byron barely did, off the strength of how well done that Fox X-Men TV series was done.
Yeah.
The animated series, you've got all that different stuff in there. They could have actually borrowed directly from that if you don't want to go to the comics, for this third film, because the first movie kind of touched on it. It had the same, tones and stuff. 2 did that. This third one could have borrowed even more so from it. So why jump all over the place? It just,
Oh no,
really
I
upsetting.
agree.
because that's another one. Ignore the comics. We can just leave the comics out of this entire movie if you really want to, and use that animated series, which was obviously such an influence on the movies. I just
Anywho,
yeah.
for
One-
those who are
One little trivium that I forgot to bring up earlier is when Storm and Hank see each other and they make comments on each other's hair. That's an indirect reference to Halle Berry's role in Catwoman, where she wore a similar hairstyle to what she had on right there, and somebody commented on it
Yeah.
in that movie.
Weird buzz cut half thing.
oh yeah. Anyway,
Little thing.
just
Anyway,
so again, for those who are watching, just like with the X-Men one, since this was a 2-hour past the 2-hour podcast, this is also going to be in 2 parts for those who are watching, because the editing time is a pain. Anyway, I'm once
I know that
again
pain.
anyway,
Telling that now, but-
I'm once again joined by Brian, Bob, and Myron for Geeking Out. Was it worth making? As always, I am Wayne the Unknown. Until next time, thank you for listening, and as always, thank you for watching.